So there's a real estate term that's a little confusing when you first hear about it, but when you actually break down the definition, it starts to make a little more sense. And that term is called absorption rate. Now, when we think of a rate of any kind, you tend to think of a value over a period of time. For instance, say miles per hour, something like that. So intuitively, in a real estate situation, you would think that absorption rate would be the number of listings sold over a period of time, like 50 listings sold per month, something like that. However, that's not the case. The absorption rate is actually the amount of time it takes to sell all of the inventory that is currently active on the market. So, for instance, if you have 10,000 listings currently active on the market and they're selling at roughly 1,000 listings per month, it would take 10 months to sell all of that inventory, hypothetically. And that 10 months is the absorption rate. The important distinction in calculating absorption rate is that it factors in the supply. Because if you just look at the pace of sales, it doesn't really account for how much supply is on the market. So, for instance, you have two separate markets. One market has 10,000 active listings, and another market has 5,000 active listings. Now, if both of those markets are selling at a pace of 1,000 listings per month, you're not going to be able to see the difference in the two markets. However, when you calculate absorption rate, one absorption rate is going to be much lower than the other because of the supply in the market. Case in point, for the month of June in Manhattan, the absorption rate was 6.3 months, which is actually down by 11% from the same time last year. Now, if you just look at it on the surface, you might think, wow, 11% properties are selling much faster than they did last year. However, because you know that supply is factored into the calculation of absorption rate, you know to look a little bit deeper. And when you do that, you see that supply actually fell by about 9% from the same time last year. So the driver of the decrease in the absorption rate is because of the lower supply rather than an increase in demand. So I know that that's a lot of information, and absorption rate is just one of the many data points we use in order to determine the state of the real estate market. However, I think it is important to be familiar with these terms as you're making decisions around buying and selling property. So, hope this helps. Later.